people on that list, and so I didn't even go to Cornell.
Can this move in the middle of the floor?
Why not?
Let's see.
But you don't,
Then you'll miss it, right?
She said she got
Yeah, I think that's
a
good
bunch
enough.
of dead
Okay.
people,
See
one
there.
person who didn't
So
even
how
go to
many,
Cornell. And
so
then
when
Jesse
we play
was
this, do you think we should dim the lights or no?
yeah, that's why I'm doing when you're here.
Oh, okay.
I know.
By the way, we have a lot of
See the
issues
lights?
with Harris.
Yeah.
Oh, beautiful,
And
okay.
also here too.
Because with the, I guess the movie has to over I'm on format.
Right.
So I went to do,
So like here,
Oh, which one was that?
to my customized list, you know, the list you create, like all my alumni in San
put it
Francisco.
in over here, right?
Okay,
Before I
gotcha.
hit set, you know, I always say
All
calculate.
right, that's what we'll do.
Well, at one point, I take it back. I sent it, and I got email, the confirmation email saying it went to like only 107
You know
people.
what I thought about last night?
And then another email
Like,
did the
do
same
you
thing.
have
It was-
did you
it
save
was
the-
not
like,
putting
if you don't have
it was not
internet?
sending it to the full list.
Oh, how do I get
And
internet
it
on
was
here?
Yeah,
I discovered
yeah, go for a dime,
email.
Right?
go for a dime, bear, bear.
And like,
Yeah, that's it.
Cornell Club just bear bear?
2 weeks.
Bear, bear, yeah. Now you're gonna,
Just came back. I couldn't do a mass email. You had to email, you had to email the client IDs, upload client IDs, or upload email addresses to get it to work. And in some cases, that
Let's
didn't
see.
work all the time.
I saw that only limited service is coming down from Boston on
kept me in
Amtrak.
tradition.
Still. So it's not fully open yet. Yeah, because you gotta have the trains there to have them come back. And they were stopping trains. Did you see that in Connecticut yesterday? They thought he got on the last train out of Boston, but he was in a boat. And that guy, smoking a cigarette, walks outside, looks at his boat, and sees the guy.
It's okay.
Today's a weird one.
Wrong way.
So look at this. Let me move away from the camera.
Oh, I should turn this up either.
This room.
Why?
Because it's gonna play the sound here.
Oh, it's gonna go nuts?
Yeah, so,
I'm gonna speak.
Oh, beautiful.
So I'm gonna say,
There we go.
This
You
should
should.
make me look fat.
I can do that. I can do that.
Did you get the box from downstairs?
I didn't, but Matt, remind Matt to get it. I think he's, oh, yeah, maybe that's the box right there.
Yeah. They've got everything. Okay.
So Andrew, you want to recording of this for archival purposes?
I would think, so. Is that doable?
It's just a question, do I also record it on here? Because one time out of 100, it doesn't work on the live stream.
Don't we want this for archival purposes?
Okay, all right,
Yeah.
easy enough. And are we anticipating
This is
any
so annoying because
questions
it keeps
from
telling you to
our-
log in.
Yes.
We are, and
On my
do
phone.
they know how they're doing that? Is that coming in on
Maybe I should
Facebook?
just log in.
Well, yes, Facebook.
Okay, all right, so I'll ask the questions never have.
She had a common tumor that burst.
I will.
And we've been doing with all these.
Oh no, these things. Oh, tell
This
Ann.
thing burst.
What?
What it does
These aren't bad, it's their
is
previews.
histamine.
They're not right out
So
of
she
that.
went into almost anaphylactic shock.
Yeah, I did part of my process. I like
Just-
last
Because we've been treating her, it was.
Art, did he respond to you yesterday?
Art?
Yeah, did he respond to you?
Oh yeah, he didn't copy you, but yeah. He said that you would be here more like.
Anger.
I think the first move of these things is always, that's the most important.
Usually the one.
Very.
This is always, the first move of this is always. Hello, how are you?
How's it going?
Yeah, you can throw them on.
We're still setting up, feel free to hang out. I'm Emmanuel, by the way.
I'm Matt Hyde. How are you?
This week has been.
You want to just grab this?
Yeah, go ahead.
And I've been to meetings where people are going for like partners.
So they have 10 in Boston.
Cancer.
And Joyce is gonna have probably
And
close to
her
20.
sister died.
So we're gonna hit 100.
So it's been kind of
Actually,
like,
she had
putting it in perspective as well.
Oh,
Nope.
yeah,
Yeah. No, she got
No,
to
putting it on, you know, like,
probably get 10.
she's been with me as long
She
as I've
should
been in
get
New
more
York. I
certs.
mean, it's like I've had her for 10 years, 11 years.
11 is a long
Yes.
dog.
Yes. So.
Yeah, they're just,
How are you?
Hi, I'm Terry. Andrew.
Good to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Thanks for helping me.
Sure.
So you have to have some actual.
There can be too many cooks in the kitchen, and I can be told to just go away, but I also
Oh,
am told to do something. Is there anything you need me to do?
So this is your friend?
No, actually, no, just figure out, because I
Sorry,
was back when you were because I'm
Sorry, I'm so early.
I didn't know.
Or yours. Good to see you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Happy birthday, I forgot. Is it today?
It's just a weird day to have a birthday because I was like having like a me day because we got one day off from work, and then
How are you?
shit happens. Have you talked to John? Yeah. I mean,
He was hiking during when it was happening. He had a friend visiting, and he was like hiking, and we were like talking about stuff. And then all of a sudden, I was like, John, you aware what's going on in Boston? And then he was all like,
oh, he was way out in Mass. Or
he was
in
like,
New
yeah,
Hampshire?
he was way out.
Yeah, they're all set up.
Because that night, you came to dinner, right? At Cal?
It is.
Oh, yes.
It was actually kind of fun to talk.
Hey, what's up, baby? Good to see you.
So I had a chance to talk about it. I get a hug. I'm not sure I'm ready yet, but he went for it, and I feel good now.
That place we were at Forum.
Yeah, I looked at
Where the
right
bar
there,
was.
right there.
I know. I remember walking down that section block, you know, where all that shit happened.
I like my last actual meeting. I was like,
So she saw the whole thing.
I graduated undergraduate.
I mean, what an incredible change this week. Yesterday I could not get to work because when I woke up, this sort of thing on my iPad, like, when the first guy comes in, and I turn on and you see like I couldn't figure it out. Yeah, you get sucked in. Because it's a free, it's like a movie, you know?
Like I got into it about like smarter people really don't just like
Well, they own that.
Sometimes we're more bureaucratic now.
Well,
It can go either way.
Last night I ran into that. It'll be interesting when I call Obama, I'm gonna make sure, you know.
Did you come in today?
No, I came in, yesterday. I started doing carcass.
Full service table.
Well, because usually when we come down, during the week, it's just, they'll go,
Good to see you.
Rich.
Hi, we've talked.
I told all this place to show up really good.
But I was like,
I feel bad. I feel like I'm like watching like behind the scenes and I have to like go away.
I'm Jeff.
Hey, Jason. How's it going? Yeah.
You're missing filthy gorgeous tonight.
Yes.
Right?
4 months. Yes. Good. Yes, I will be.
Well,
Can't wait.
It's like the Machiavelli was giant work.
Yeah. Well, you met me. You know how
I don't know if they got, I don't know if they got any of this year, but like the actual break today.
I know.
Alright, so still time to go.
But
I'm sort of,
I enjoyed the York City. That's alright.
we got what's that? Where are you from originally? I'm from Atlanta. Okay. I never felt like I mentioned you like Cornell. Thank you for all the work. A lot of times, like, you should explain where Cornell is. How's it going? I feel like you were sick. Oh, I love it.
Permission for that? So I'm going to start in a couple minutes. Everyone could take their seats. We're going to start in a minute. Hello everyone and welcome to CUGALA's first annual meeting. If everyone could take their seats. All right, so calling to order the first annual CUGALA's annual meeting here in New York, and I'd like to welcome everyone who is here physically in New York, as well as those of you who are viewing us by live stream, especially those of you also who are at viewing parties in Ithaca as well as Boston, and I'd especially like to say how glad we are for those of you in Boston who are safe, and our thoughts are with you. So for those of you who are here, this may be a little bit new. It's definitely new for the board. Every organization is supposed to have a meeting of its membership, and we've been in existence for quite a while, and based on the records that we have, we're not really sure that there were a lot of meetings in the past. So this is essentially a recolonizing meeting for the organization. So, my name is Emmanuel Sarunas. I'd also like to introduce the board members before we officially get started. Could board members in the audience please stand? Terry, Jason, is Matt and Scott in?
They're
They're out in registration. So if you have any questions throughout the day, please speak to any of us. We'll happily answer any questions you have. Our board members are here from as far away as Los Angeles and DC. Our board is composed at present with myself, Jason McGill, Scott Pesner, Olivia Ty, Matt Hyde, Terry Horner in DC, Nick Daniels in San Francisco, Nancy Law in Ithaca, and CJ Lucenhop in Boston. So a very diverse board. The effort is we would like to take CUGALA from being something that has been present historically in San Francisco and in New York to being a nationwide organization. So we figured in terms of the agenda, it would probably be very important for people to get an idea of how CUGALA started. So we would like to welcome to the podium one of CUGALA's founders, Art Leonard, to give a presentation about the early days of CUGALA and how CUGALA formed. Art?
CUGALA got started out of my 5th reunion. I graduated from the ILR school in 1974, went to law school in Boston, and then came to New York in '77. And I have been trying to remember, and I can't reconstruct, how it came to be that Mark Schwartz, a classmate who I don't think I had previously known, was in my rental car when I drove up to Ithaca for that reunion. But maybe he was a friend of a friend. But somehow he connected with me. We went to reunion. He was set upon discovering gay classmates. Neither of us had been out as undergraduates. He said he was sure there must be gay classmates. And he had highly refined gaydar. He would find them. And he actually did connect with 1 or 2 people who it turned out were gay from other parts of the country. And in the ride back to New York, he was bubbling over with the idea, let's start an organization of some sort. And I would do the execution from New York, and he would do it from San Francisco, where he lived. And our first thing was a joint letter to the editor of the Cornell Alumni News asking them to put a notice in the Alumni News about the formation of an alumni organization. And to our gratification and surprise, the editor said yes. He was eager to give us any publicity we wanted. And so we actually had a letter or an item of some sort in the Cornell Alumni News shortly thereafter. And I had a post office box at the time, because I was also the mainstay of what is now the Lesbian and Gay Bar Association in New York, but then was a social group that I had started in 1978. And so I had rented the P.O. box for that. So I had a P.O. box for stuff to come in, and a stream of letters got started. But we really struck gold early on with 2 people who became very, very interested in the idea of a Cornell alumni group. One was Robert Roth. And Robert Roth, for those of you who are not Cornell gay history buffs, Robert Roth was a co-founder of the first gay student organization at Cornell back in the late 1960s. And as he told me, he was sitting in the Straight one day reading the New York Times, and he saw an article about the formation of a gay student organization at Columbia, which was claimed to be the first gay student organization in a university in the country. And he said, this was around '68, he said, well, if Columbia can have a gay student organization, Cornell should have a gay student organization. And he knew a lot of other gay people on campus and said, we should have an organization. And my understanding is that the university administration was not overtly hostile to the idea. So Cornell got the, what they call, I think, the Student Homophile League. And, but Bob was the real activist, the spark plug of the group, who wanted to have big gay dances at the Straight. He thought it would be an interesting irony to have big gay dances at the Straight. And he said, ultimately, hundreds of people would come to these dances. It was amazing. People just came out of the woodwork. And although there wasn't any membership list, Bob had a terrific memory, and he sat down and we went through old Cornell directories and things, and he came up with a list of hundreds of potential members of CUGALA. We just didn't have addresses. And that's where we ran into resistance with the university. They weren't going to give us addresses of alumni. So we had this big list to work on, and it was before the internet. You couldn't just Google names and track people down easily. So this list, I don't know where it is now, if it still exists, but there was a list of hundreds of prospective CUGALA members. But here in New York, it was mainly, we had some social events, and we met at someone's house with cloth and scissors and sewing and paste and made a big Cornell banner to march in the Gay Pride March. This was our first big public event. And so we marched in the Gay Pride March. The banner just said Cornell. But it was mentioned in newspaper reports on the march that year. And that brought in more people, and people who joined in from the sidelines during the march. And we decided we should have some sort of project. And that's where the second person who got very involved early on is important, Steve Siegel, who at the time was the newsletter editor at the Gay Synagogue. That's how I knew him. When I joined the Gay Synagogue, I became acquainted, but I didn't even know he was a Cornellian at the time. But then when the item appeared in the Alumni News, Steve immediately got in touch. And he's also was a genealogist and was the archivist then at the 92nd Street Y. And he said, Cornell needs to buy gay books for its library, and we should raise money for that. And we got in touch with the university librarian at the time, and our proposal to establish a fund to help support the purchase of gay periodicals and books was our first real project as an organization. And we met resistance, surprisingly. Usually universities don't want to discourage alumni from giving money, although they might not like a particular purpose. And our proposal got caught up with a proposal from an alumnus on the West Coast, David Goodstein, who was the publisher of The Advocate. And Goodstein was from one of the early 1950s classes, and he wanted to set up an Institute for Gay Studies at Cornell, which the administration wasn't excited about doing, even if he would raise the money for it. And that got sort of tangled up with our proposal, which came in at about the same time. We had no idea about his, and the university was just saying no to everything. But Steve knew the director of the university library and asked him, on your next trip to New York, can you meet with us? And that was our first official meeting with any Cornell officials. We met with the director of the library, Lewis Martin, and he agreed to champion our proposal, and we put together a written proposal to endow a fund, and it took us years and years and years to raise the minimum amount necessary. But we finally endowed the fund, so now there are books. I think most of them are probably in the university, the Human Sexuality Archive, but many of them just in the general collection that have little book plates that say that they're donated by the Cornell University Gay and Lesbian Alumni Association. The other thing we did, because we had quite a few lawyers in the group, and Bob Roth specialized in representing small businesses, among other things, we incorporated. And that also incurred a little bit of discouragement from the university, which was concerned about an organization using the name Cornell University in its name, over which they exercise no control. And we persuaded them that we were not going to do anything to besmirch the name of the university. And finally they gave permission, which they had a right to withhold, and we were allowed to incorporate. And I think you have some copies of some pages from the incorporation with the signatures of the original directors. So that was the early years. And since then, we've gone through periods of greater or lesser activity. Some of our early officers unfortunately passed away. Some more recently, some actually long ago. The AIDS epidemic hit us as hard as it hit any other gay community organization. But it's amazing to me, here we are, is it more than 40 years later? Almost 35 years later, roughly, and we still exist. And this is entirely due to the efforts of volunteers, because CUGALA has no staff, has no office, it's volunteers. And so we should be very grateful to all the volunteers who are keeping the torch burning. And I think this first formal annual meeting will be a launching pad for many exciting projects and activities for all of us. Thank you very much.
So being able to trace our history back to 1979, based on what we know, probably puts us among the oldest, if not the oldest, college and university LGBT alumni association in the country. It's something that, you know, more and more universities started to recognize during the 80s, and actually I should say not necessarily universities, but alumni started recognizing the need for. But Cornell has been one of the standard bearers, and so we need to reconnect with that legacy. As Art mentioned, for roughly 3 decades, one of the major driving forces behind this organization was Steve Siegel, who many of you probably did know. And unfortunately, Steve passed away last year from cancer. And that is part of the reason why there's this huge effort in the past year to 18 months to reinvigorate this organization. You know, Steve, for those of you who knew Steve, was at every Cornell event. He had a heart that beat carnelian more than so many of our alumni, and was dedicated on multiple boards. And Scott Pesner will say a little bit more about Steve later. But he was the driving force of this organization for so long. He took that original list of several hundred names and had tripled and quadrupled it until it was nearly 2,000 names at the time of his passing. So, you know, let me give you some background on sort of where we are now. So I mentioned that there's now formally a board, and as Art mentioned, there are bylaws and a charter that was filed with the state of New York. So in 2007, we all remember Lehman, you know, went down and declared bankruptcy, and that really started the recession across the U.S. And that affected universities and colleges across the country like it would any other business or nonprofit. And at that time in the university's history, especially with LGBT organizations on campus, with student services, there was not a lot of money directed towards those student services and organizations. There had previously been a director of the LGBT Center on campus, and there were student support services in Gannett, as well as in the Dean of Students office, but there were a lot of vacancies. And the university implemented a hiring freeze at that time. So effectively, during the beginning of the recession, what had been the support services that were supposed to exist didn't. The students reached out to the alumni, and in 2007, 2008, 2009, a group of alumni convened. We started having conference calls. We started doing the research that a lot of us maybe should have done years and years before, but it just wasn't as urgent before as it was then. And so we started asking questions like, well, if we wanted to endow the LGBT Resource Center so that there was a fund that could perpetuate the programs and perpetuate the support staff, what might that cost? What other support services are on campus, and where are they? In what offices? How do you align these people? How do we as alumni have an impact? So that was the early days of this current effort. Things really started to solidify, and I'd say probably 2010, when a few of us who are now currently on the board, Scott, Jason, Terry, Nick, Steve, we sat down to come up with a proposal about what this organization might look like if we got a bunch of alumni together in a room and said, let's do something. Let's formalize this organization rather than have it be a pride party here, a happy hour there, all that, mostly being in New York, but also certain events going on in Ithaca as well as San Francisco. And we came up with this idea that there would be a board. There'd be annual meetings of membership. There could be service projects, happy hours, mentoring activities with students. That there could be chapters in places, not just New York and San Francisco, but DC, Boston, Los Angeles, Chicago. Wherever there was a contingent of LGBT alumni from Cornell, people could self-organize into chapters. So that was 2010, 2011. At that same time, we learned that Steve had cancer, and that there would, by virtue of necessity, have to be a transition of the organization. It couldn't just be Steve anymore. It had to be a group of volunteers. And it was also sort of a generational shift. Steve had personally maintained this list of almost 2,000 alumni on his home computer. In fact, Steve's passing was somewhat a surprise to everyone. It wasn't, he thought he had more time than he had. And so when he passed, we never had that list. So a lot of what we had to do in finding everyone who's in this room, as well as the hundreds and thousands of others who we eventually have been in contact with, is search our own databases of friends and colleagues and former classmates to see who's out, who's not, who might be interested. So this has really been one of those efforts that required years and years to get to the point that we are at now, and I'm so thankful to see so many of you gathered in the room today, as well as those of you who are viewing by live stream across the country, because I think it's a really promising future, and we've just started to build a foundation for a new chapter in the history of CUGALA. You know, what we've done over the past year has been a mix of friend-raising and fundraising, definitely an exercise in organization building. You'll know that we've continued to do the Pride parties here in New York and in San Francisco. Going on now well over a decade, we've continued to do events at Reunion, including a presentation at the Human Sexuality Collection, which Brenda Marston is the curator, has been, still is. And every year at Reunion, she opens up the collection to alumni to view. We do a mixer in the evening on Saturday nights. The LGBT Resource Center hosts students as well as alumni who are coming back for a presentation about what the Resource Center does and how it impacts campus climate and the student community there. We've continued to do, you know, the happy hours. We've expanded and we've done service projects. We've done the AIDS Walk in New York. We've reached out to homeless shelters for LGBT youth in New York. So these are the sorts of things that have happened in New York that are starting to happen elsewhere. You know, most notably in Boston, there's been an effort. There's an effort in Ithaca right now. There's an effort in DC to start raising chapters. And as I said, we also have the chapter in San Francisco that's been up and running under Nick Daniels' leadership. So where are we going from here? There's a lot of places that we could take this organization. You know, the board felt it important that we convene and have a meeting with alumni to say, what are your thoughts? So we'll be breaking out in small groups at lunch today to sort of have you give us that feedback. There'll also be those same breakout discussions in Boston and Ithaca, where alumni have gathered for viewing parties. But we want to know what you think. Part of our relaunch as an organization in 2012 was to do a website, social media, have that presence out there, ways for people to communicate and interact with the board, with the organization. So if you haven't seen the website, I definitely encourage you to go. You can find us on Facebook, you can find us on Twitter and LinkedIn. There's plenty of ways that you can receive the message about how and what we're doing as an organization, how to interact, get involved. But you'll also find on that website a link to a survey. So if you, for example, are viewing by live stream and are not at a viewing party or here in New York, you can provide us feedback on what you'd like to see CUGALA do. And let us know how you'd like to be involved. There's, I'd say another component of this is how CUGALA interacts with other organizations on campus, as well as other LGBT organizations that are out there. When the few of us decided that we would formalize a board and move towards you know, putting some structure to the organization, we reached out to Alumni Affairs and Development and have received an incredible response from the university. So much more so than we ever expected, given, you know, the history and just natural inclinations in the country. And there, you know, we know that there's a shift happening. But we have two great staff members who we regularly work with. Yves Carmon-Perouse, who is outside at registration, and Anne DiGiacomo, who's standing right there next to Scott Pesner. So they work with us regularly. Evie is on the Alumni Affairs side, and Anne is on the development side, but they work together as a team, helping us figure out how we're going to reach out to alumni, how we can put together a successful program that alumni want to be involved in, And then also helping us figure out the stewardship issues, because as alumni, there are institutions on campus that we want to support to make sure that they're there and present for future generations of LGBT Cornellians. For example, you probably also have received mailers from the Resource Center asking for you to provide support, whether it's of time or finances. This year is the 25th anniversary, if you can imagine it, the 25th anniversary of the Human Sexuality Collection. So there's a push there to get the word out about what the Human Sexuality Collection does, invite people to, visit. We did a event in New York City at an art gallery here 2 weeks ago to sort of kick off that 25th year celebration. There's also an LGBT studies program on campus too, and faculty who are dedicated to research and teaching in the area of LGBT studies. So there's a lot of things this organization can do. So we'll be excited to hear your feedback at lunch, as well as throughout the day. So that, I think, I'll probably leave it as is for the program, for my report, except for to say just a couple other things. You'll also notice, especially those of you who are here in New York, but elsewhere, that we interact with a couple other organizations. There is an inter-Ivy alliance of organizations that regularly puts together programming that we co-sponsor with. It's primarily led by Princeton. They also have a very old organization. They were founded in '84. But they took the lead here in New York and have taken the lead in a lot of other cities to provide programming and invited the participation of the other Ivies as well as the 7 sister schools. So we regularly work with them. We've invited them to some of our programming as well. We also are a member of the Mosaic organization, which is Cornell's diversity coalition. It provides an umbrella for all the diverse alumni organizations. And so as time passes, you will get more and more information about how you can participate in Mosaic if your interest is broader than just LGBT issues. Mosaic is composed of SIBA, which is the Black Alumni Association, SINA, which is the Native American Alumni Association, SILA, which is the Latino Alumni Association, CAAA, which is the Asian American Alumni Association, and I think SICA, which is the Korean Alumni Association. So that's a broad umbrella for a lot of different organizations that have intersections, especially in our community. So we'd like to get you guys more involved and informed about those things that are going on, because with diversity and the diversity efforts on campus, all tides rise by a common effort. So we have a vested interest in supporting that. So as I said, those are the two asides that I forgot to mention initially in my report, but I did want to get those out there. I think it provides some background. So moving on, we have a few business items that we would like to attend to at this meeting, and so I'll ask if you would to open your red packets. You'll find a document that is entitled Ballot. So what we're doing at the recommendation of the board, and as I mentioned to you, the board is 9 people. CJ Lusenhoff, Nancy Law, myself, Scott Pesner, Jason McGill, Matt Hyde, Terry Horner, Olivia Ty, and Nick Daniels. The board feels, and it's the reason that it's 9 is 9 is the number that's out there in the governing documents currently. That a board of 9 people is somewhat limited, especially with the overwhelming effort that we need to undertake as an organization to get everything going in the right direction. 9, we want to see a board that's diverse. We want to see a board that's diverse not just necessarily in terms of race and ethnicity and background and gender identity, but geographically, in terms of peer groups within our different Cornell classes. So the board has recommended that we adopt a few resolutions, a few changes to our governing documents to expand the size of the board to 15. We think 15 is a manageable number. We think it provides us the opportunity to get that diversity. So I'm going to run through the wording of those amendments. And here's where being a lawyer somewhat helps. You'll find in your packets 2 documents. One is entitled Certificate of Incorporation, which is the document that Art referred to as the document that was filed with the Secretary of State of New York. And it is the document that basically puts the world on notice that CUGALA exists. It doesn't say a lot. It's a very short document, you'll notice.
Missing a page.
It's missing a page, too. Well, that's not helpful. Hopefully that's not a pertinent page. But if anyone... Oh, it's the first page. Well, in that case, I have it on PDF. It's also available on the website. But we're really only concerned with 2 provisions of the Certificate of Incorporation. One is paragraph 10 that says currently that there should be no fewer than 5 members, no more than 9. So the substitution we're proposing to make is change 9 to 15. The second is a housekeeping issue, which hopefully won't be objectionable, which is the Certificate of Incorporation still lists a very old P.O. box. That probably is Art's old P.O. box as the place to send mail to the organization in case, for example, the Secretary of State should ever need to send us something. Just makes sense at this point to change it to the University of the Alumni Affairs Office. So those are the first 2 issues that we've called to your attention that we'd like for you to consider. As you'll notice, the options are to approve the change, to disapprove the change, or to abstain. And if you abstain, it's essentially a no vote. You express no opinion either way.
If we raise it to 15 in a working session that the board may have to convene, what would be a quorum? Because I would hope that a quorum would be at least maybe 9, where you allow for maybe a vote or 2 above half. So if something had to be passed, first of all, we would have to have a quorum. Second of all, it couldn't get deadlocked like 7, or 4 and 4.
So the issue of the quorum is in the bylaws.
Because I don't believe you can up the number without changing the actual mechanism for things to get work.
Let me just check that quickly. Do they not?
For trustees? It says 4 trustees constitute a quorum. So that would have to be...
That'd be 80% of what it is now. I would hope we'd have at least 2/3, so even 10.
4 of 9, then to kind of keep that same...
Or 12, 75%.
So,
it's 12 numbers.
4 of 7. So it's one more than half. Let's just make it one more than half.
So, as to your point, we didn't contemplate the quorum issue, so we need to.
8.
So what we can do here is, well, let me continue on. So the quorum issue is addressed in the bylaws. And so the changes to the Certificate of Incorporation only address the change in the size of the board. The bylaws essentially are the document that governs the day-to-day workings of the organization. You'll notice they're much longer. So we did not contemplate a change in the quorum. We still can. The changes to the bylaws are essentially to the staggering of the terms of what would be 15 members. So you'll see that when we originally constituted the board, there were 9 of us. At drawing of straws, essentially, 5 of us got 1-year terms, 4 of us got 2-year terms. To extend the size of the board, what we proposed is that this year you would elect 8 members that would serve 2-year terms. There would be an additional 3 members who would serve 1-year terms. And then really in 2014 and 2015, this would even out. So in 2014, in every other even year, you'd elect 7 members. And then in 2015, you would elect 8 members. And this would just continue to rotate between the years. And everyone who is elected to the board thereafter would serve 2 years. The next change, it's mostly just a wording change. It talks about the annual meeting at which you elect the board, changes this reference here to 15. It also sets an eligibility requirement that you have to be, as of the date of the meeting, a graduate of Cornell. So those were the issues that we put before the membership to consider. Now, you'll note, as to the question, it's on page 2 of the bylaws. In Article 4, it is the last sentence in the 4th article of the 3rd paragraph of the 4th article. It says, all actions by the Board of Trustees shall require the approval of at least a majority of the trustees present, 4 trustees constituting a quorum. So that's something the board did not consider when we put together the...
I'd like to propose that we, along with these, consider amending that sentence, since it was essentially one more than half of the number for a quorum, that we, along with this amendment, I'd like to propose that we change that sentence to read, all actions by the Board of Trustees shall require the approval of at least a majority of the trustees present. Let's see, it would be
7 plus 1, 8.
8 trustees constituting a quorum. I propose that modification.
So there's a motion on the floor as well as a second to change the reference in the 3rd paragraph of Article 4 from 4 trustees to 8 trustees.
Point of clarification, what constitutes present? In an age of technology, like...
Good point. So our bylaws are from the 80s, before all this technology actually existed. So let me give you sort of a sense of what we hope to do over the next year. And this is, again, a process that I think is going to take a while for us to sort of get our hands around, which is the board would like to do a complete rewrite of the Certificate of Incorporation and the bylaws to bring us into the 21st century. That will be no small challenge. That's why we kept the number of amendments limited as this go around, and it was completely an oversight that we didn't address quorum. I would say, based on, and Art, you can jump in here, based on the technology, I think the statutory regime actually permits presence by telephone. Any place where you visually or orally can connect with a meeting in real time, they would recognize as present. But that's obviously not defined here.
I serve on another nonprofit board, and we amended our bylaws to allow attendance by telephone at board meetings.
So, Emmanuel,
Mm-hmm.
I think there are a lot of things that the board has contemplated, and we sort of drew a line between the things that we had to consider to kind of continue operating and to get to stage B, and then thinking that we'll spend the next year between now and the next annual meeting coming up with a proposal for kind of a 21st century governance structure for this organization, asking Evie to help us to look at the other diversity organizations that Iman mentioned, to see what maybe university best practices are, as well as other LGBT organization best practices, but that we couldn't do that in time for this meeting. So we really drew the line at what was necessary to kind of keep this organization functioning within the constraints of its current bylaws. And as Iman mentioned, the nominations committee and the board, it was just an oversight on quorum. So if we could fix that, and along with this sort of proposal to expand the board so that we can be more representative of our membership and move on with having those folks who we hope to elect today come back to us next year with sort of a 21st century bylaws. It's going to be a discussion we'd like to involve all of you in as we go.
Can I just add to that? Part of the reason you're seeing a very limited number of changes was a recognition on the part of the board that, unlike what's about to happen, we hope, all of us who are currently on the board were not elected because there was no way to have an election because we hadn't had an annual meeting. So we appointed, the board was appointed for a 1-year term, and the idea was that we would do exactly what Terry said, those minimum things that would allow us to get a slightly larger board and could bring it to the membership for a vote, and from there be able to move into a more meaningful and sanctioned process of changing the governance in a way that we can come back and address issues of quorum. I would submit to you, I think the issue raised is a very critical one. I don't know whether members present feel that we need to try to change the quorum for the next year. I'm not opposed to it, but in service of sort of moving us forward, we might also consider that if everybody seems generally in agreement with the pieces now under consideration, a formally elected board could go back and do those things that you could then bring back to you all next year with things that you could actually really chew in, sink into deep into. That's what I'm trying to do.
Yes.
If I can give a point of information and even Cornell historical significance that I played, Michael Vincent Crea, back in '77, I graduated. I was the chairman of the Sports Advisory Committee with 1,500 athletes under the exceptional leadership of former athletic director Bob Kane, who became our Olympic president. Bob emphasized the rights of athletes. I was chairman, but we had to expand. Just like you said, that this organization had basically one person doing everything. And so we went to president, vice president, treasurer, and then a woman representative and a male representative because we had Title IX. And so I would just offer as a change in the quorum to keep the same ratio. If 4 out of 5 was a quorum, that's 80%. I would say let's have 12 out of 15, only because we're in flux.
Yeah.
If you only had 51%, you may not be considering every aspect of our demographic. And it would be more inclusive, we'd have more people working, and then changes, like was just mentioned, don't have to happen immediately, especially since this is our inaugural year, that we can work with that. And the quorum can also be changed more easily than the actual state responsibilities.
So the original quorum was 4 out of 7, just as a point of clarification.
Oh, 4 out of 7, I'm sorry.
Yeah. So, I don't know if that changes your...
I would just say, I would go with 9, which is 60%, not to go where Congress is right now, because that screws everything up. But just so, if you need work to be done, if you had 8, you could have a 4 and 4 tie, and then things might not get done. So the 9 at least allows maybe some action where it's needed.
Because there are also things that are addressed by percentage, there are things that are addressed by 2/3.
If I may make a suggestion,
Yes.
I would just cross out 4 and make it a majority, and here's why. There are a few things going on. One, the number of your board members is in flux right now, and it's changing, so you don't want to put a number in there. And 2, frankly, an organization, I've done volunteer organizations also, and it's a lot of work, and yes, it's good to force the officers to get more people involved. On the other hand, sometimes it's an impossibility, and you want to give them the leeway. I think a simple majority, which just crossing out 4, would give them a simple majority if they want to change it later, but I'd like to give people who are working hard the leeway to be able to execute what they're doing.
Let me modify my proposal then to do exactly that, and to strike the word 4 and put a majority of the Board of Trustees, because you are right, the number is allowed to fluctuate.
So there's been a friendly amendment to the existing proposal, which is to change, so there's a second. So the proposal is now that we will have a majority of the board constitute quorum. So what I'd ask for those of you who are present, unless there are any other questions about the bylaws and the charter changes, when you finish your ballots, you can just write in a C here, and then just the C will be for the change to majority, and you'll have the same options: approve, disapprove, abstain.
Right.
And you can mark whichever you prefer. But there'll be a C. It'll be as to the issue of the quorum, the proposal's majority, and you can vote that way. Now, for those of you who are viewing the live stream, we've put the ballot online. The ballot is at this address right here, http, your :/bit.ly CUGALA ballot 13. So for those of you who are voting online, you will not have the option to add to your ballot. So what I would say is if you would like to vote on this matter, and you're viewing by live stream, or you're at a viewing party in Boston or in Ithaca, I would suggest that you email your vote on this question C, 4C, to et29@cornell.edu. That's my email address. And we can add your votes to this vote. But again, for those of you who are viewing remotely, this is where you would go. It should be in the email that you received with your instructions, bit.ly/CUGALA ballot 13. You can vote for all the existing questions there. It'll tabulate online, and you can just email me your vote. Again, et29@cornell.edu. So that's the presentation of the modifications to our charter and bylaws. I'd ask now if Terry would come up to the podium, and I'm going to ask Terry to address how we've proposed to do the electoral process this year, as well as present the slate.
Thank you, Iman. Before I do that, I'd like to take this opportunity on behalf of the board to thank Emmanuel for his unflagging leadership this last year. He stepped into that role when we kind of got out the organizational AED and shocked it back to life, and we had to figure out who was going to be president, who was going to be secretary, who was going to be treasurer. And Iman willingly stepped up to that role and has been an exceptional leader. We have this event as a result of that. So thank you, Iman, for your efforts. It's particularly important that everybody who is viewing on live stream vote, because we need 2/3 of the registered members of this meeting, which includes the people who actually registered to view it by live stream, to be able to legally change these documents. So we're going to be looking for you all to bring up those votes. So very quickly, what the nominations committee, which Nick Daniels and I led, are proposing is that we adopt the following 5 individuals who were, if you will, self-appointed to the board this last year, that they be included on the ballot, to include Matt Hyde, Jason McGill, Scott Pesner, Olivia Ty, and Emmanuel Serraris. And then in the event that we are allowed to expand the board to 15, that the following 6 individuals be added to the board. You'll see their names listed on your ballot. In the interest of time, I'm not going to read them all, and I would ask that you approve that on your ballots.
Do they?
So as additional background, I wanted to let you sort of know how we did this year. When we started publicizing this event back in end of February, beginning of March, we sent around in the initial registration materials a call for people to self-nominate. We figured that was the easiest and fairest way to ask people to get involved. There's a lot of, like, for example, your class organizations, the existing board may form a committee and then just pick people who've been involved in the class. We asked for volunteers. And so we got 22 self-nominations for this board from all over the country, from New York, Philly, Chicago, Los Angeles, San Francisco, places that some of us may not have even heard of. So we know that there are a lot of CUGALA members out there who wish to be involved, and so we were then sort of tasked with the idea of how do you narrow this down into the current structure that we have, and also if we expand the board, how do you fill those seats, short of inviting everyone here to give their own speeches and campaign. And so we adopted a nominations committee to vet the candidates, and so I really thank Nick and I thank Terry, because what they did in leading that process was to contact each of the candidates, review their applications, speak to them, ask them questions about what it is that they do. And it was a situation where these were impossible decisions to make, because there are so many committed alumni that we have, so many people who want to be involved. But the committee put together a slate of candidates they believe has a good mix of class years, colleges, geographic representation, representation of gender and gender identity, so that we can move forward as an organization. Strategically, there's a lot of people who are on that slate who will be in areas where we hope to form chapters. So that's why we ask you to approve the initial slate of 5 for re-election, as well as the additional slate of 6 if the membership should choose to expand the size of the board to 15. We think it's an excellent group of people. Now, as an aside, those people who were not put on the slate, we're coming back after you, because as we'll discuss later in the meeting, we hope to set up chapters and we hope to set up committees to do the work of the board, to do the work of the organization, and those committees and those chapters need leaders. And so there are more than enough positions to go around, more than enough ways for our alumni to get involved, to exercise leadership, to give their time and energy to CUGALA. So with that, I ask each of you to complete your ballots. I would ask Anne, would you mind collecting ballots? And for those of you who are viewing by live stream, as I said, complete your ballot, submit it no later than 1 p.m. this afternoon. 1 p.m. is our cutoff for online voting. And as I said, if you are also voting by live stream, please send me an email, ET29, with a I approve, I disapprove, or I abstain to question 4C. So I want to give you guys a sense of what the board has been discussing so far in terms of a structure for this organization, because I think that structure potentially will have an impact on where we go. And as I said, this is purely a proposal. This is not the final product. But what we were thinking, and again, this you'll have an opportunity to discuss if you're here in New York, as well as in Ithaca and in Boston, is a 15-member board. That board, because it's 15 members, would have an executive committee. And then there'd be a series of committees that would do the day-to-day work of the organization. So we were trying to focus in on, if you're an organization, what are your essential functions? Membership and participation, nominations, you can call it volunteer pipeline. And by the way, we're not wedded to any of these names for the committees. These are just placeholders for now. And again, the structure may change too. That's why we're throwing it out there as a proposal to get feedback. So nominating, also serving the function of sort of volunteer pipeline, because we have opportunities to lead committees for officers, for board members within the structure, but Cornell is a vast place with like 650 different alumni organizations. And if you have an interest that is beyond the scope of CUGALA, we can say, well, you should really get involved in the DC Alumni Club, or the Cornell Club of New York, or of Washington State. Or, you were in the band, so join the band club. I mean, the number of alumni organizations out there is amazing, and there are also leadership organizations like PCCW, which is the President's Council of Cornell Women, Cornell University Council, and of course also the Board of Trustees, where the most committed alumni to the university in terms of their volunteer experience, the breadth of professional experience, could add real value. And so we as an organization have an opportunity, individuals within this organization have an opportunity to foster that leadership, foster that volunteerism, and potentially nominate people up. So anyhow, nominations committee. Then PR and communications, which is essential. You guys should know at this point that Olivia, who just joined us, please stand, Olivia, has undertaken a huge effort to get the website up, to get our social media up. I mean, she basically wrote the whole thing and put together the social media outlets. So there'll be a committee for communications. There'll also be committees for development, fundraising, Programming, which Matt has undertaken here in New York and has done an incredible job. He pulled together the logistics for today's meeting, so thank you, Matt.
The four of us here did this meeting today, so we're just really happy all of you guys are here. This is really incredible from where we started to be here today.
And then reunion, because one of the things we're really hoping to do, and I think would be a coup, is to have a gay reunion party. So every year, you know, there is a reunion mixer, so for people who are coming back, but we're thinking, just invite all of our LGBT alumni back to Cornell every, you know, say 3 years. And we'll have our own residence hall, we'll have our own track of programs, speakers, activities, parties. Because other universities do it and do it very well. And I think Yale did it this year in February and got like over 500 attendees. I mean, it was a huge.
Hurricane Sandy's happened.
Yeah, so there's potential here because guess what? We're bigger than Princeton. We're bigger than Yale, and we know how to have more fun too. So Scott is going to be taking the charge on a CUGALA Reunion 2014. So what we want to do is just discuss that committee structure at lunch, and then also the idea of chapters. As I said, we're here in New York, we're here in San Francisco, and we have efforts currently underway in Ithaca, DC, Boston, and LA. So the idea would be that there'd be this national organization with committees overlaying a regional structure. You know, but some people have talked about other ways, you know, the sky's the limit, anything goes. We just want your feedback. You know, there was talk about having a special organization for the law school and the business school and the vet school. Whether there should be additional committees focused on specific events that we do. Say, for example, if we wanted to do a signature annual dinner like CAAA, the Asian American Alumni, who have a Lunar New Year party. Those sorts of things. So having said that, those are all in your packets. We hope to discuss that at lunch. You'll also notice in your packets that there is a committee questionnaire if you would like to be involved in a committee. So please, you know, you don't have to fill them out today, but it would be great if you're interested that you do fill them out today and just leave them here on the table. But if you want to be on one of these committees or volunteer your time in some other way, fill out the committee questionnaire. Basically asks for your basics. How do we get in touch with you and what are your interests? Easy enough to do. So moving on with the agenda, unless there are any questions. Okay. I'm now going to ask Scott if he'll come up and talk a little bit about this whole idea of LGBT Reunion. And Scott, also having been involved with this organization, working with Steve for a number of years, is going to talk a little bit about Steve too.
By the way, that's Andrew Gosen, who's the Senior Director of Social Media for Alumni Affairs. So I thank him for coming down, but I also I really want to give a hand to both Emmanuel and to Matt Hyde for putting this event together. It took a lot of work. I mean, most of the other board members were in the background for this, and so they did yeoman's work, and we really appreciate it. And I don't think, I've known Steve pretty much since I graduated from Cornell in class of '87. And because I'm very involved in New York, I got to know Steve. I was never involved in CUGALA until a few years ago, when we realized that this board had to be reinvigorated. But I've gotten to know Steve. Steve and I served as both as vice presidents of the Cornell Alumni Association, which I still serve on. Unfortunately, when Steve passed away, obviously, we lost someone who really cared about Cornell. And I think he would be really impressed with this turnout right now. Because he really, thanks to Art for starting it, but Steve carried the ball for a very long time. He had some help, but he really carried the ball. And when I saw Steve's sister at his funeral, she had no idea about how much he was loved, because we all showed up. And not only us, the gay and lesbian alumni, but Cornell alumni leaders from all across the New York area and Cornell Alumni Affairs folks showed up for his funeral. So it takes a really big man to have really drawn that crowd. And I also want to say that I also serve as the LGBT representative on the Committee on Alumni Trustee Nominations. And we've only had a stake on that board for about 12 years. And I think Steve would be proud to say that for the first time ever, we did have an out candidate on that trustee nominations ballot, Jason. Unfortunately, he didn't get the award, get to make the Board of Trustees, but I think it says we're really going places. And I know we're running a little over time, so I'm going to make this quick. Mark your calendars, June 5th through 8th, 2014. I expect to see everyone here and everyone there, back up in Cornell. Now, when we said we're going to have a reunion, all of a sudden my name appeared next to the personal organizer. I'm my class reunion chair, so I know there are many reunion chairs that are members of this organization out there. I need help. So I know there are a couple in this room even. I know there are a couple out there, or people who have served as reunion clerks, or their reunion committees, or have a parent that's a reunion chair. I talked to one today that wants to get more involved. So we need your help. It's not going to be we don't know what our turnout will be. It won't be an extravagant affair, but it will be a lot of fun. We know that people may feel more comfortable coming back to a reunion, maybe not with their class, but with people who they just feel more comfortable being around. But we also want to make this a celebration of who we are, and I think we can have a really strong turnout. So you'll be hearing more information. Planning really begins to start in June when I go up to Ithaca for this year's reunion, and then we start planning throughout starting in the fall. But I need your help. We need your help. So if you want to get involved, let me know. I have already spoken to a couple of people who are very interested. So come see me, just email me, sjp17@cornell.edu, and I'll be glad to have any assistance possible. Thanks.
So mark your calendars. We want to see you there. We want to see 500 or 600 of us there. I think it'd be a hoot, to put it mildly. Also, Scott mentioned something else, which I should have mentioned probably up front. There's about 100 of us who are participating in this meeting. So there's probably 50 of us in this room in New York, but there's about another 50 people who have signed up either for the meeting in Boston or Ithaca, as well as just to view this from live stream, whether they're in Portland, Oregon, or Chicago. So, you know, for a first meeting, this is a huge, huge turnout. So we're very, very thankful that you guys decided to do this on a Saturday morning, especially those of you who are in California and on the West Coast where it's, you know, almost 10 o'clock.
Buenos Aires.
Oh, someone's in Buenos Aires too. Wow. So we're really present. So again, thank you. So the next and last thing on our agenda is a report from campus. You know, Matt Carcella has been an amazing force on campus for the Cornell LGBT community, both the student population as well as staff and faculty. He came to the center at a time when, you know, there were budget cuts, when there wasn't a lot of programming dollars, and he came from Princeton where there were huge amounts of resources and people basically just said, do your best. And he has turned around a huge program there in Ithaca. And so we're going to hear a little report from him about what's going on this year. But what I would definitely say to you is if you feel you can get involved, either as an alumni volunteer or as a mentor, or whether you have time, if you have the capacity to give as well in terms of dollars, this is a very, very good object for your giving to Cornell. So, Matt couldn't join us in person in New York because tonight is Filthy Gorgeous. So for those of you who don't know what Filthy Gorgeous is, it is the largest LGBT party in the Ivy League. And it's at Cornell, and he's the one who's the adult and supervising, chaperoning, undertaking this massive effort where basically over 1,000 kids are going to show up for a dance party. So he pre-recorded his message to us, and we'll do it now.
Good afternoon, CUGALA members. Congratulations on your first ever annual meeting. My name is Matt Carcella. I'm Associate Dean of Students and Director of the Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, Transgender Resource Center. The LGBT RC on campus continues to thrive and provide services to students, staff, and faculty. Some of our collaborative efforts this year have led to a new gender-inclusive housing policy, allowing for rising students to live on campus in mixed-gendered suites and single rooms. We also have a new LGBT and ally Greek ambassador program, where we're asking for one representative from each of the PANHAL, IFC, and MGLC chapters to serve as an LGBT ambassador for their chapter. And we are working on a 1,000 Allies campaign that will launch at the end of this month with a 2-week art gallery showing where we photographed 1,000 allies on campus and asked them why they're an ally to the LGBTQ community. We've been able to maintain a lot of programming this year, including bringing to campus some speakers such as Robin Oakes, who spoke on bisexuality, singer-songwriter Adrian Gonzalez, Sex Ed Boot Camp, and tonight is our largest LGBT safer sex positive event called Filthy Gorgeous, which is why I can't join you today in New York City. Our special guest tonight will be Mr. Chase, DJ's Modern Love, and Manila Luzon from RuPaul's Drag Race. The LGBTRC has played a very active role this past year in responding to a number of bias incidents under the newly named Cornell Responds brand. LGBT bias incidents continue to be the most reported type of bias at Cornell. And even though we were named as a top 25 university for LGBT students, we recognize that there's still a lot of work to do for total LGBTQ inclusion. We've also been able to offer over 35 trainings and workshops to students, staff, faculty, and community organizations. And we've begun work with the Weill Cornell Medical School in their efforts to support their students, faculty, and residents. Collaborations with the Human Sexuality Collection and the LGBT Studies program are ongoing, and we look forward to working on a proposal to create an LGBT postdoctoral fellowship that will have a direct connection to the LGBT Resource Center. Our work with Alumni Affairs and Development is ongoing, and we've been very successful this past year, having tripled our annual giving, and we also received the largest single gift to the LGBT Resource Center in our history. As we look forward to a more formal fundraising campaign, we know that we're on the right path. And thank you to all of you who have continued to be a supporter of the LGBT Resource Center and our programs. We truly couldn't do it without you. As we look forward to the summer, I hope to see some of you in San Francisco and New York City for our Pride parties. And we'll also be launching our LGBT Resource Center Advisory Board, so stay tuned for that. I'd like to thank the CUGALA Board for their hard work this year and their continued support of our program. It is such an honor to be part of a dynamic and fierce community such as this. Enjoy the rest of your meeting.
So for those of you who haven't been up to campus, for those of you who haven't been back up to campus recently, the LGBT Center is now housed at 626 Thurston. It used to be the old Alumni House. It is now the Center for Intercultural Dialogue. And so a lot of the diversity student organizations and services are now through there, but the LGBT Center is now there as well. So there's a large physical space finally on campus for them, a very safe meeting environment for students. So again, this is our first annual meeting. I thank you for participating. I thank you for those of you who are participating on live stream. If anyone didn't catch the full presentation by Matt, it's also available by YouTube in your meeting emails that you were sent your login information, so you can definitely view and review Matt's remarks. But thank you for coming, and we'll now move into lunch in New York as well as Boston and Ithaca. Thanks. Oh, sorry, one question.
I just want to recognize two individuals up at the Intercultural Dialogue Center. Dr. Renee Alexander and her associate, Lisa Johnson, not only hosted during, I was back in June for my 35th reunion with others from the 7s and 5s, but Dr. Alexander and Ms. Johnson have created such an atmosphere that all of the groups mentioned can feel so free and comfortable and inclusive, which I know I never felt. And actually, I came out for the first time at Open Mic for Mike, when Mike Abrams, during the last summer, I was up there, celebrated his 100th birthday and his newest book. So our props and our hats and hearts off to Dr. Renee Alexander, Alicia Johnson, and even more importantly, not every person's contributions to Cornell is on a field or on a court or on a sports team. And we have young Cornellians that staff voluntarily, or maybe for study and some kind of scholarship funds, the center. So to all of them, let's give our thanks.
We will also, just as a point of information, we will try to announce the election results by the end of the lunch. But preliminarily, the numbers look good here in New York. We just have to check in with everyone who voted online. Are we? Okay, so we'll be ending the live stream, or the live streaming now. Thank you for you guys who participated by live stream. In Boston and Ithaca, you'll have separate conversations. We'll have our conversations over lunch.